Well, hello and welcome back to the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel,
I'm Phil.
and this is a podcast where we journey chapter by chapter through C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. This is chapter 14 of The Horse and His Boy, How Bree Became a Wiser Horse.
Yes, we are so close to the end. This chapter, the next chapter, and then we're done, right?
Yeah, this is our second to last chapter here.
In our third to last book.
That's true. You're right. Yeah. Do you want to have any more numbers you want to spout out right now?
Sure. It's we're recording this on December 21st. It's the longest night of the year, so we have plenty of time to get a good episode in. Might have to edit it down.
Since you've showed our hand here, it's the fact that we're recording it today on the 21st of December.
Shows that we want to keep things fresh for our listeners.
Oh, well, it does show that we have fully caught up to where we need to be. But also, it's going to come in today because this is the anniversary of the death of St. Thomas, the apostle who died in the year 72 in the first century. And I want to talk about him later today. So I wasn't going to mention that just because of the day, but I will mention that today's
How wonderful.
Yeah, it's different in different traditions. I don't think that Roman Catholics celebrate it today, but in a lot of, not all, but some Anglicans celebrate today. As I think 1979 Book of Common Prayer and 2019 as well. He's commemorated today. So
Oh, fun. So that'll come up later in the episode?
yeah. I want to talk about it a little bit later as we talk about Bree becoming a wiser horse, which is good because he's kind of annoying at the beginning of this chapter.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bree needs some wisdom.
Got a little under my skin right now.
Yeah.
Or at the beginning, but then ended on a much happier note. And obviously, I was right. The Shasta and Coronar brothers. So
You're right.
I wasn't really
that must feel good.
I mean, I was like 99% sure. I don't feel like Lewis was really hiding it in the last couple of chapters at all. So
Yeah.
But yeah, it's we're coming up here on the holidays. You've got a nice glass of water in front of you.
I do. In a Nalgene.
In a Nalgene.
Man, I tell you what, we have so many great opportunities for sponsors.
You think Nalgene wants to give us some money?
It'd be nice.
I've got Trader Joe's. I've got some wassail with some kind of, I don't know. I think it's I don't know. Anna's doing yoga in the other room.
It sounds like poorly
kind of
pronounced German. I have some wassail.
You'd never heard of wassail before.
I had not. I just learned about it tonight.
I learned about
It's
it.
an English tradition, isn't it?
I believe it. Yeah, I do believe it comes from England. It's kind of like this like tart kind of apple. It's cidery kind of thing, but usually it has wine in it as well too. That's about all I know. I have never. I made it once.
It didn't turn out very well.
It wasn't great. And usually I'm just handed it. And someone's like, this is wassail. And I'm like, this tastes great. And then I just go on with my life. It's good. So Anna made this for me. And it's, I also have here, which I'm not going to force you to eat, but I feel like this is a good plug for what we're going to be releasing on Patreon in just a couple of days here, which, well, I guess we already did release at this point, which is I have a box of Turkish Delight, which you and me and Sarah Jane and Anna all ate together.
We all ate together, and we did it in a way that is not ASMR. We turned away. We turned away from the microphones, and we tried Turkish Delight, so you can hear our reactions recorded in real time, played back at your leisure.
Yeah.
On the dancing lawn. But to give a little preview, I actually have a little something special for you, and Daniel doesn't even know about this.
What are you doing?
I had a friend from Northern Ireland. Shout out to Rosie.
Okay.
Import us illegally.
Our
Rosie too.
Our friend. Come on, man.
Yeah. Not friend of the show. We're not sure.
Not friend of the show. She might not listen.
She is now. The show's her friend.
Okay.
Because she imported Cadbury Dairy Milk Turkish Delight embedded in a sea of chocolate, and we're going to try it right here.
We're going to try it on the show.
On
right
the
now?
show.
Wow.
To give people a little preview of what they could get.
Wassail here?
Do what?
What if it doesn't go with the flavor here?
Well, I didn't know you were going to have
Why
that.
did you put, dude, the NSA is going to like come, or like the TSA, I said NSA, but the TSA, you telling her that she's sneaking stuff into the country here.
Yep. Oh, this is great. Everything's in kcals.
So this is Turkish Delight, but it's not, this doesn't look, it's like a bar, like a candy bar.
Yeah, this is milk chocolate with Turkish Delight filling, 21%. And again, those are metric percents.
Okay.
Ingredients: milk, sugar, glucose syrup, cocoa butter, cocoa mass, vegetable fats, palm and shea, emulsifier. All the stuff's here. Tapioca starch.
All right, give me a little bite of this while we do this first. I've got some. I might have some Turkish delight, which I don't.
There's only one flavor you're gonna have.
Yeah, I'll save that for dancing lawn. But there's only one flavor in this box that I do appreciate. It was fun too. I mentioned it on the dancing lawn to have my students. We had some Turkish delight to see the just diverse reactions from the crowd. Yeah. All right, what do you think about this so far?
So far, I think that I've tried this type of chocolate before. Not the biggest fan, but I'm going to do this for our listeners.
For our listeners, I will talk while you eat because no one wants to hear either of us eat.
I'm going to move the microphone away.
Yeah, move it away from your mouth so no one can hear that. Phil's now eating his. So it's chocolate with Turkish delight on the inside, which is something that I never knew that anyone wanted, but I guess Cadbury knows that people want this. So Philip here doesn't look too happy about it. He actually looks pretty upset about this. So if Nalgene does sponsor us, we'll never get Cadbury because of what I'm assuming you're about to share with us. So Phil, tell us, what are your thoughts on chocolate with Turkish delight inside of it?
That's a new flavor for me.
Ooh.
Yep.
Oh man, it tastes like soap.
I want to be clear. I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
I do not like that. Oh man.
Might have to take a quick intermission.
No. We got to keep it here. We got to keep it's live, man. We got to keep going.
That's true. Recorded live.
I will say this
in front of a yoga audience.
Yeah, my wife's in the other room doing her yoga. Oh boy, the Turkish delight that we had last week when we were recording, way better than this.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but could you pass me that Turkish delight?
Yeah, you want some Turkish delight? So you want the orange?
I'm going to keep my reaction to myself because that is premium content.
Oh yeah.
But I want to wash it down with a little something.
Man, that was that literally tasted like soap.
Yeah, it tasted like soap and chocolate.
Mm-hmm. I just feel bad because Rosie risked
a lot
to bring this into the country, and we're definitely not going to finish this. I'm not taking another bite of it. Are you?
I do not plan to, but I think that...
Sorry, I meant the Cadbury, the Turkish milk thing, not the actual box of Turkish delight. I'll probably finish this eventually, except for the rose flavor, which I will never touch again.
No, that...
It's like they took all the things I didn't like about Turkish delight. We're like, let's really hammer home those points in this new chocolate bar.
Idea for a fan fiction, though. The Turkish delight that Edmund tries isn't that great, and he just gets out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot shorter.
This is true. That if in Narnia, the White Witch had conjured this Cadbury Dairy Milk Turkish, it just says Turkish. It doesn't say like a bar or anything, which is interesting to me. A Cadbury Dairy Milk Turkish. That's all it says. If the witch had given him this, it would have been one of those like memes where it's like the book would be right over after that. It would say like written by C.S. Lewis, the end.
Yeah,
because he would have left it.
Smash cut to credit.
Yeah. So these are made in Ireland. It says right here, made in Ireland.
Made in Ireland.
So, okay. Well, thank you for bringing this onto the show, Phil.
You're welcome.
And this is what people want. This is what people want to hear. They've said many times, they've asked if we could usually be eating while we do the show.
Yeah.
Yep. We usually have a drink.
Probably the most requested thing is more smacking sounds.
We've heard from
slurping.
more mouth noises.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a large contingent of our fans who really do want this to be an ASMR podcast, which I don't know if those exist. Are there I know that there's like a lot of YouTube. I got some kids that are really into it. And I like some of they're not like people, but I like some of the ambience where it's like you go and it's like someone made on it's like a computer game. They're like, I made Bag End, and it's just the windows are open and it's just like nature sounds in the background. I'm like, I like that. It's like, it'll say like, ASMR ambient something. I'm like, I like that. That's great in the background. I love putting that on while I'm like writing a paper or something. Yeah. But maybe you and I, after we get through the last battle, that's what we do next.
We'll do ASMR.
We'll just sit here and we'll talk about each other's lives. We both saw Spider-Man last night, so we could talk about that. But we'll whisper it, and we'll then like chew food in our mouths. Oh gosh,
I'm
it's
taking
what
my
people
headphones
have
off.
usually said they've really wanted from us. I actually have an email about it later today.
Yeah, we could even make a separate podcast with us just prepping, where we're just turning the pages of the book.
Oh yeah,
and it's like it turns every 47 seconds or so. Not quite the same when we both have an electronic reader, but we could have typing up the chapter summaries. and then yours would be a little bit faster because you do it at the last minute.
I know you're being facetious here, but I love the sound of someone typing.
Yeah.
Like I really like the sound of somebody typing. I like going to work, like in a school library.
Oh man,
and someone's on the computer just typing away.
The best.
Like that's
fourth floor where you're not allowed to talk. You're not even allowed to breathe in the back rooms, and it's just typing and turning pages.
It was actually great. Phil is alluding to when we were both at VCU. The library had 4 floors, and the first and second floor were like common areas, and it was like kind of anything goes. And it was like maybe 25% studying, 75% people like just pretending to study but not studying. Yeah. And then the third floor was like whisper only, but not collaborative. So you could whisper if you needed to. But then the fourth floor was a hard, like multiple signs as you walk in. Like there is no talking, no whispering, no any kind of noise.
Yep. And if you did speak, 4 or 5 of the athletes would come in and pull you out. Like a SEAL team mission.
It was actually something that if you think about how sometimes immature 18 to 22-year-olds can be in college settings, everyone really respected it really well.
They did.
I would go work there, regularly on the 4th floor, and everybody was great. It was a great sport. And everyone was like, look, if you want to go whisper, if you want to go do, like, there's other floors to talk. Just go to this floor to be silent. No one even had like loud music on their headphones. It really was it was nice.
Yes. Someone told me that there was a white noise machine playing on both the 3rd and the 4th floor, and I didn't realize that. But as soon as they pointed it out, I realized, oh wow,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very well done. Cool. But it would not be as nice an experience. I think you would hear every sniffle otherwise.
Well, I think we have not talked at all about Narnia, so we probably should at this point. Phil, in this last chapter, in chapter 13, Shasta and the Narnians, they fought at Anvard. They won. Rabadash was defeated. And this chapter takes us back to the Hermit of the Southern March. That's his name, right? Hermit of the Southern March. Mm-hmm. And we learn what happens, and we finally do get the reunion of Shasta with the rest of our heroes. So do you have a chapter summary for us today?
I sure do.
Take it away.
A summary of chapter 14. Hwin and Erebus want to leave the hermit's home and see Shasta, but Bree is hesitant. After deducing that he is stalling due to his tail being cut off, they prepare to leave before being interrupted by Aslan. Hwin trembles in fear, Aslan kisses her on the nose, and Bree admits that he has been rather a fool for thinking that Aslan wasn't real. Before bounding away, Aslan reveals that the scratches on Erebus's back were the exact same as the one her stepmother's slave endured because of the girl drugging her in order to escape. Half an hour later, they are visited by Prince Kor, who turns out to be Shasta. The prince explains how he was kidnapped and he washed up on shore thanks to Aslan's help, then invites them all to come live with him in Arkenland.
Well done. That was a little long. Was it like right up to the...
I'm almost always pushing it right up to that limit. I actually trimmed it down a little bit. I think I ended up at 140 this time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there really was a lot of content here in this chapter. Last chapter, we just had the one battle for the most part. And this one, there's many different conversations that flow really nicely to begin the resolution of this entire book. So we should probably go ahead and start with Bree being a little insecure about his tail.
Yes. It got hacked off, and he really does care about this. And it so much so that he really fights them wanting to leave.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to go.
This is a really interesting dynamic between Bree and Hwin. Bree here in this chapter, and I was saying it was annoying me a little bit. I feel like I'm giving Bree a hard time here. Bree, though, does display the immaturity that often can maybe come from someone who is really zealous in and young in their faith, right? And we see that in the way he, is afraid of going into Narnia. We see that in the way that he talks with such arrogance about Aslan, despite knowing really nothing about the situation. And I think a lot of that, I think you and I both have known people like this. I think we both were people like this at some point. I think most people go through a phase like this where if you're a person of faith and you begin to really take your faith seriously, or it just kind of becomes your own. Speaking of college, I think for a lot of people this does happen in college because maybe if you grew up in a Christian household, you kind of go off and now it's kind of you're in charge. You're not kind of following in your parents' footsteps. And I know at least for me, maybe not everybody, for me, that meant that I became like kind of really zealous in a unkind way. Mm-hmm. Where I had decided that once I'd finally kind of gone out on my own and studied a little bit of theology or kind of branched out from the tradition that I had grown up with my parents, that I had really figured it out at 18 years old. Yeah. That it was like freshman year of college. I had figured everything out there was to figure out. And I, at the same time, was extremely insecure about the fact that I kind of felt like I didn't have everything figured out. But I had to put on this air of that. And I think Bree comes across like that a little bit in the way that the whole book, the whole journey has been about getting to Narnia. And now he's letting something like, his tail not being there, being like this, like, oh, let's just wait a little bit longer, and there's so many like logical inconsistencies here. One, which Quinn even points out, we don't even know what the tail situation is like in Narnia. Bree doesn't remember it at all. He doesn't even know if horses roll around there or not, right? And then two, it's not like he chopped it off, over some like cowardly deed or something. He did this so that they wouldn't get captured as he was bringing, Shasta and Aravis through. What was the name of the city? Tashbaan, right? And so it's not. It was a really courageous thing he did. It was a really brave thing. And instead of focusing on this victory of virtue that Bree had in those chapters, this bravery, this courage, this selflessness to chop off his own tail to help others, he's letting that get in the way because I don't want to be embarrassed, right? Despite the fact that this is like all of those things actually point to his goodness, right? And then later on, and we'll get to this with Aslan, he is so certain that he knows who Aslan is. It's almost this kind of like cultural faith, but not an individual, faith for him, where it's this kind of like, it's cultural. And he's like, well, it's just like, this is just the way that it is. And I'm just going to kind of follow along with it just because that's the way things are without actually questioning it, himself. And that's why he comes to this conclusion that, well, no, Aslan's he's like a lion. Like, of course he's not a lion. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think what we're seeing from Bree, I think is comparable, in my opinion, to someone in kind of those early stages of faith, or at least the way that I was. Maybe you were not like that, but
yeah, I definitely agree, and I think we've all either been that person or known that person, or probably a combination of the two, where you don't know it all, but you really feel like you have to put on this air of knowing it all.
Yeah,
but it also it speaks to how easy it is to twist something good. So he has all these good qualities. Chopping off his tail was a good thing to do at the time. But then it's twisted into like it's some pride, and it's preventing him from accomplishing what they set out to do. And I think that it's a very easy trap to fall into.
Yeah. And Hwyn and Aravis, I think their reaction is really helpful. It probably doesn't feel great to Bree, but I think it actually is helpful in the long run, where they almost just like laugh. Not even at him, but just at the ridiculousness of the way he's acting, kind of pointing out some logical fallacies in his thinking to be like, this doesn't make sense, actually, what you're doing. Yeah. And not laughing isn't like we want you to feel bad, but laughing isn't like just let it go. Like there's so many other great things to celebrate here. But it's in that kind of response from these two that Aravis kind of comes up and asks the question, like, hey, you always say like by the lion's mane. Tell me more about that, which is a great evangelistic opportunity for Bree here, and he doesn't do great.
Nice.
Tell me about that.
He comes in. He starts with he's not really a lion, and it's just the thing that comes to mind. It's not an exact 1-to-1, but it reminds me of Jesus was a great teacher, but he wasn't God, and it's just. That's not true. He was God, and if you just give this piece of it, it's not the complete story. And while he was a great teacher, he was so much more than that. And saying that he's not, in this case, Aslan's not really a lion, is just really trying to diminish it. Also, how does he know that? It just, a lot of things don't add up there.
Yeah, exactly. He kind of the words he says, he even says this before he kind of goes in and makes this statement. As Aravis says, if he isn't a lion, why do you call him a lion? Bree says, well, you'd hardly understand that at your age. And I was only a little foal when I left, so I don't quite fully understand it myself. So he acknowledges, actually, and I think in a helpful way, like he's humble enough to be like, I only kind of get this myself. But then he goes on, and a couple paragraphs later.
And while he goes on, he's standing with his back to the wall.
Yes.
And I love the way his face is described. He's talking in a rather superior tone with his eyes half shut.
Oh, yeah.
We know you can picture exactly what that looks like.
This is how I podcast. Yeah. I make that face all the time, right? Yeah.
Your nose is a little further up in the air.
Yeah. And here's what he says. He says, no doubt, when they speak of him as a lion, they only mean he's as strong as a lion. Or, to our enemies, of course, as fierce as a lion. Oh, something of that kind. Even a little girl like you, Aravis, must see that it would be quite absurd to suppose that he is a real lion. Indeed, it would be disrespectful. If he was a lion, he'd have to be a beast, just like the rest of us. Why? And here Bree began to laugh. If he was a lion, he'd have 4 paws and a tail and whiskers. And it's right when he says whiskers there that Aslan's whiskers actually touch him. But let's go back and talk about some of what's happening here and some of what Lewis is doing as our author. I mean, there's so many great things. You already mentioned one of this kind of modern in the sense of like world history, not modern in like very new idea, of Jesus as a great moral teacher, right? And Lewis is addressing that. He addressed it already in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe with the trilemma that he kind of gives on to Lucy of like she's either telling the truth, she's gone mad, or she's lying, with the whole like Christ as lunatic, liar, or Lord that Lewis presents in his apologetic writings. But there's also here some of the a much more ancient debate, which even happens, pretty much as early on as the 1st and 2nd century between Christians, which is trying the debate over Jesus's divinity and where that divinity comes from, right? Where you have certain people, in just a generation or so after Christ's resurrection, they're arguing like, well, did Jesus become God? Was he born God? How does this divinity work? Is he equal with God? Even if he is God, is he like a demigod? Like, how does all of this work? And some of the, and what's interesting is that some of the arguments against Christ's divinity are not the same as arguments that Lewis might have had to confront in modernity, which are, how could he be God? The supernatural doesn't make sense. Even go back to like Thomas Jefferson cutting out, the supernatural stuff out of his Bible, right? Like, let's just take the moral aspects of this and the teachings, but not any miracles or anything divine, in a much more like post-Enlightenment world. But then what's interesting is in the 1st and 2nd century, you have people saying, well, Jesus can't be human because then he'd be like us,
right?
He would have, human
4 paws and a tail.
Problems, right? Exactly. Yeah. As he says, he would have paws and a tail. Like, that's ridiculous. That's almost an insult because, we're right here. We're in the Advent season. Humans are so needy. Humans can barely do anything when they're born, right? Even compared to other mammals who can do much more right, when they're born than humans. That it's almost, there was this argument that it's an insult to God's strength, right? To become, incarnate as a human being. And I think Athanasius does a really great job, a little bit after this, kind of arguing for, and actually C.S. Lewis wrote, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called, he did some kind of preface to something that Saint Athanasius wrote. I don't remember what it is. Maybe you can look it up while I'm talking. But I think that's what we're seeing here with Bree. It is
the incarnation.
Yeah. What did Lewis write?
Introduction to Athanasius on the Incarnation.
Okay, so he wrote like an introduction. Yeah. But I think you get this like argument, which seems to come from a good place, or at least a place of understanding respect for God as divine and supreme, but ultimately doesn't recognize the beauty of Advent, which is that God comes down to be one of us, despite the fact that it's humanity and
right.
that's we're fallen, right? That God comes into that, and that is what's so beautiful about this season that we're in. And I think that's kind of where Bree's coming from. It's not Bree sitting here like, oh, I couldn't believe this guy. This is ridiculous. It's more like, no. Like, that would mean he's like me, and he can't be like me because I'm ashamed. I have no tail here. There's no way that the Lord of Narnia would be like us. Mm-hmm. And that's actually the truth of the gospel. Is like he chose to be like us, right?
Yeah. And which makes it all that more incredible. I think the correct thing there is to feel how difficult that is, mm-hmm. and how unusual that is. Yeah.
So Aslan shows up, and it's hilarious. When she metaphorically falls on her knees, and has a really beautiful line where she says, "You may eat me if you'd like. I'd sooner be eaten by you than fed by anyone else," which is absolutely beautiful in the response. Aslan is really proud of her, but then he turns to Bree, though, and here's what Aslan says.
"Now, Bree," he said, "you poor, proud, frightened horse, draw near. Nearer still, my son. Do not dare not to dare. Touch me, smell me. Here are my paws, here is my tail, these are my whiskers. I am a true beast."
And this stood out to me, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, because here we are on the anniversary of the death of St. Thomas in the 1st century, and this very much jumps out to me like, I don't remember if it's the last chapter of John or the second to last chapter of John, where obviously many people are familiar with this story, but maybe not everybody is. But why don't you share with us the story of doubting Thomas? Yeah.
Thomas is not sure that Jesus really raised from the dead. Mm-hmm. And Jesus offers out his hands that have holes in them and invites him to see for himself the physical manifestation of that reincarnation.
Mm-hmm. And then Jesus kind of lightly rebukes him and being like, you had to see it to believe it. But there's been others who believe without seeing.
Right.
There's also really just outstandingly beautiful depiction of this by Caravaggio, who I've brought up a couple of times in the show, that I'll put in the episode's description just because it's one of my favorite paintings of this scene. Obviously, the scene's been depicted a ton, but this is one of my favorite ones, is by Caravaggio. So I'll put that down in the description. But this, to me, reading it for the first time, as I did earlier today, as I was preparing,
it's been a busy season.
It has
a lot of great movies coming out.
Yeah, as I read it today for the first time, I immediately jumped to the story of St. Thomas here. Is that where you went as well? Did that stand out to you?
It is, and I'm interested to see what jumped out when we hear more about Shasta's story coming up here soon. Mm-hmm. If there was any connection you made, because this chapter in particular was very heavy with the not one-to-one retellings, but definitely pulling from great stories in the Bible.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of beauty in it, and it's Aslan's response here is not anchor. It's clear that there needs to be a change from on Bree's part, but he also kind of Bree says, "I'm afraid I must be a fool," and Aslan's response is like, "Happy the horse who knows that while he is still young." So There is this kind of like gentle, there is a correction made, but it's very gentle and lovingly done, and then it's welcomed. And then he turns to Aravis and tell us about what happens with Aravis here.
Well, one of the questions that Aravis has is, will any more harm come to her by what I did? So we find out that the scratches on her back are a one-to-one recreation of what the slave that she drugged, her stepmother's slave, she drugged her in order to get away. And that slave was then punished because Aravis wasn't being watched. And Aravis got to feel the consequences of that. Yeah. But she's now asking Aslan, will any more harm come to her? And Aslan, again, says that he's telling her story, not this other person's.
Yeah. And that line comes up again later as Kor, now, a.k.a. Shasta, tells his story where one of the children kind of acknowledges, I guess Aslan would say that's someone else's story. And this idea of Aslan's providence, Aslan's control, Aslan's supremacy over all is very clear in this chapter, that he is aware and an integral part of every person's story and knowing where they overlap with one another, but not necessarily sharing it with all. There's that kind of mystery to it all. But yeah, we do hear that, hey, this was maybe to help build empathy within you, to build, within Aravis, because it's something she struggled with for most of the book. But it's like, even your escape, like, it has consequences. Like, someone else was hurt because of you. And it's not that, yes, you were in this like oppressive system that was about to marry you off as a teenage girl to a very old man. Like, that's a horrible thing. But recognize that even your escape, like, actually hurt someone else. It hurt the slave who was in the house. And that's not, even your getaway from this, like, in you leaving, that still hurt other people. Yeah. And it's not that, like, it's inherently even the wrong thing to do, but it is, like, I think Aslan's reminder to, like, not forget that there's, people are affected by your actions, even if they're the right actions. Because, I think about this a lot of times in a lot of, like, the leadership theory that I read, where there's times where you have to make a hard decision, and it really can be the right decision to make, but it's really important recognizing that it might not be the most ideal for every person you're making it for. And being a good leader doesn't mean that you only make decisions that everybody likes or that are always beneficial to everybody, but it does mean at least recognizing that other people's experiences might be different than your own. And I think that's what Aslan wants Aravis to know, especially as she's now heading into Archenland here. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming to eventually marry Shasta. Well, I don't know if that's my dilemma for later on. I think they're going to get married. Maybe not like their kids. I guess they're 14. I think there's going to be some kind of comment of they're going to eventually rule together, kind of thing. Like, I don't think they'll say married or anything. I think they'll be like, like, y'all will make a great
duo.
You're great rulers of Narnia. There's some kind of allusion to that. I don't think we'll see anything else. But
of Narnia, or
I'm sorry, Archenland. Yeah. No, Narnia. They're gonna take over. Yeah, they were the white stag that draws the kings and queens out of Narnia. That was actually their pet. They were trying to get them to run away. Yeah, they were trying to get them to go back in the wardrobe. No. But yeah, I guess I'll just do it now. But that's my dilemma, my idea for this next chapters that they'll rule together.
Yep. Well, so speaking of Prince Kor, he shows up.
He does.
And Aravis bows and then realizes that Prince Kor...
Aravis curtsies.
She curtsies.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But not like us.
Yeah, she does it in the Tarkina way, the Calorman
style. Way. Yeah. And she sees that this prince is a mere boy. And I know that I'm the one reading this for the first time, but going back when you read this for the first time, were you like, this is definitely Shasta, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's very clear.
With a brief moment where I was confused because Kor and Corin are so similar.
That's what they do there. You got Dare and Darren.
And then that's immediately explained. That's pretty nice. I wonder how long that lasts. They must not have more than 3 or 4 kids.
I guess not.
That would get very confusing.
Darren.
Yeah. And then it'd be like, you're Co and you're C.
Right, let's look at some of these names, because Kor or Shasta does come in and says, hey, that's just kind of how brothers' names run like that. And he gives an example of Kor and then Corin. And then there's Dar and Darin, or Dare and Darren, I don't know. And then Cole and Colin, or Cole and Colin. I don't,
Yeah, probably Colin, probably Darren.
But no, I want to ask you this, not the pronunciation. What, they have a third kid. What are the parents naming these kids? So if you got Dar and Darin.
Mm-hmm.
What's the third kid?
Doringa.
Doringa. No, that's. I want the.
You want to go
name.
the other way?
Yeah.
Just D.
Oh, D. You think you're short of this?
Hey, D.
All right. That's interesting.
I don't make the rules, man.
I think it's Darren, pronounced the same, but with 3 R's instead of 2.
Okay, yeah. Just add an R each time.
Just add an R. Darren.
And then the 4th or 5th child would be Darren.
Yeah. Okay. Are you saying Cole here?
Yeah, I guess Colin makes more sense. It just sounds...
Just because it goes... Yeah, it looks like the word Colin.
Yeah, but I guess Colin Powell...
Was his name spelled like that too? I think so. Yeah, I definitely spelled I in it. Right?
It was.
Google has confirmed that it was. So you've got Cole and Colin, and the T is going off in the background.
It sounds like we're torturing robots in Return of the Jedi. They changed the name.
Or that Mr. Tumnus is making us tea in his cave.
Ah, yes.
That's what we'll pretend it was.
It is ambiance.
The ASMR ambient stuff we're talking about. There you go.
Yeah, I bet if Tumnus lived today, he would be really into this chill hop.
Oh, the things with the anime characters are doing homework and stuff.
Yeah,
my kids love those. I'm into it too.
I hope someone does one of those of Tumnus.
There's one for Star Wars which is really cool, and there's one for Lord of the Rings
that one
too.
with Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah, you see
that's
too?
so good.
That's really fun.
She's studying. Oh
yeah,
man,
there's some Lord of the Rings ones too where they do like chill hop for Lord of the Rings. I'm so into it. All right, but now that we know that it's pronounced, we'll at least go with colon here. Colon. The third son is.
Well, maybe it's a daughter, Colina.
No, I want the son's name though.
Colliner.
Colliner.
Yeah.
Colander.
Collider. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Higgs Boson for the for the next one.
Oh goodness. So it's interesting. Do you think that Cor and Corin were twins? Obviously. Do they have another brother? And what is he named?
No, because they're twins. If they had another brother, it would be a triplet.
Do they have another younger brother?
Oh, a younger brother. Corini.
All right, let's go. Interesting thing. Interesting way of doing names here, but good for them. Good for the Arkenlanders.
And then shortly after we learn their names, Cor says he's quoting a very famous Monty Python speech, which maybe they were inspired by this. Who's to say? But a mere scratch when he is asked about his wound.
Yeah, he has a room and he says, "'Tis but a scratch."
Yes, and he says it in a rather lordly tone, and we all know what that means.
Oh man!
What's great about that is he scraped his knuckles falling.
Yeah.
And he's like, this could have happened very far away from a battle.
But he acknowledges that though, in his own humility. Yeah. Are we just going to call him Cor, I guess, now? Sure. All right.
Yeah. And that was masterfully done, too, when Lewis says, we're going to call him this from now on, in the middle of explaining something.
So Cor is like, yeah, like I fell off. The battle's not really what I thought it was going to be like, and does not really sugarcoat either his role or the reality of the situation. We talked a little bit about this in the last episode, and I think that works really well for him.
It does.
As far as his development goes. But then he sits down and gives the super long explanation of where he's been. And since you've already brought this up, would you like to kind of walk us through this giant exposition dump? It's not really exposition. It's more just like narrative just being thrown at us of kind of his whole backstory.
Yeah. Well, at first, from out of left field, he says that his father is a brick. Not really sure what that means.
Was not familiar with this terminology.
Maybe it's a metaphor
for someone. He says, by the way, father is an absolute brick. Yeah, I actually looked it up on the Kindle, and I had to get all the way down to the 6th definition. At first I thought it was the 5th one. Let me read you. The 5th one says, a smartphone or another electronic device that has completely ceased to function.
Yes.
Figured that didn't really make a lot of sense. So I went to the 6th one, which says British, informal, dated. A generous, helpful, and reliable person.
Okay. And did it say where that came from, or the first usage, or?
No, it just gave me that. I did want to go back to. Have you ever heard anyone refer to a smartphone as a brick?
Yes.
The only thing I've heard is like the thing you plug in your iPhone to. That's the brick.
That's the brick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, your iPhone doesn't usually turn into a brick, But if you try to change something and it doesn't go very well, people will say you bricked your phone.
Oh, that's okay.
Turning a noun into a verb.
I'm not familiar with this at all.
Yeah. It doesn't happen as much anymore, which I think is a good sign.
Okay.
But it used to be that you could really mess your phone up.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Now I've learned something.
Now they're waterproof and they're well built, and we have a lot of history behind
I've learned 2 new uses of the word brick. Keep going. Tell us about this.
So he says that he and Corin were twins. They were both born, and then a wise old centaur gave them a blessing and kind of prophesied that something was going to happen with them, and somebody got jealous and kidnapped him and took him on a ship and tried to get away, and then that ship crashed and he floated with Aslan's help. There was one person with him, and that person probably sacrificed his food to keep the baby alive, and then Aslan pushes the boat the rest of the way, and then it picks up kind of where we learn all the stuff at the beginning of the book.
So very much here, Aslan's control, his providence over the whole situation. It was interesting to hear this. A big naval battle, which we've never heard really described in Narnia. That was kind of interesting to hear. From 10 a.m. to sundown, I think they said they fought.
Just nonstop oranges being thrown from both sides.
I am not...
Right in the belly buttons.
Okay. Do you even spell naval the same way? Is it also... No, it's not. No. I didn't know.
Naval was AL when you're referring to military stuff.
Okay.
And then naval oranges are EL.
Sorry to make you explain your own joke.
Do you know Alfred Hitchcock had his removed?
His orange?
No.
Oh.
His navel.
He didn't have a belly button.
He didn't have a belly button. He did not like those.
True.
Look it up.
All right, I will look it up. He's one of my favorite directors, really.
Yeah.
No belly button. Now, don't look it up right now. We're on the show. This is a G-rated show. Come on.
Sometimes I like to look up things that I learned as a kid to see if they're still true.
You probably were telling everybody that Mr. Rogers was like
a sniper.
A sniper.
That's why he had long sleeves to cover up his tattoos.
I remember hearing that, and they're like, "Oh wait, no, he was a Presbyterian preacher."
And a child psychologist too.
I think he had an MED. I don't know that that's true. I'm not going to say anything because
let's just speculate.
We're just making more lies.
But see, then Bob Ross actually was a drill instructor.
Yes, he actually was in the Army.
It's hard to tell which things are false and which ones are real.
Yeah.
You definitely can't put foil in the microwave.
No,
but you can put sand in the microwave for 10 minutes and it won't get hot if there's no moisture. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
Everybody's learning new things. I'll look up the Alfred Hitchcock thing later. I don't want to know right now. It's just it's very odd to me. That's actually quite troubling if it's true to me. Phil is distracted. He is now all he cares about is Alfred Hitchcock. So I will walk us through the rest of this chapter here as Shasta Kor wraps up this story. He explains that although he's not super excited about all the education that he's now going to have to do, which he mentions twice, he actually invites Aravis to come live with him. He's like, we are going to be living in Anvard now, and Father wants to know if you'll come live with us. We have no lady in the court.
Well, there's one more problem that they need to address as they are all deciding to go to Archenland together, and it is whether or not talking horses roll. And this is a big concern of Bree, he's continuing to get better. He now knows that Aslan is real and is a beast, but he's still preoccupied with, is this going to be okay?
Yeah.
And we also learned a little extra detail. He really likes to roll around.
Yeah.
And I don't think this could be part of your dilemma, but
I already did mine. I'm good.
Right. Or for the next chapter, or the one after that?
Wait, there is no one after that. Yeah,
in the next book. We're never going to know. But do you think that Bree will continue to roll around? It seems like he really enjoys it.
I think he will do it, but always secretively.
Okay.
I think even after he has grown and he's become this wiser horse, I think he'll be still a little self-conscious.
Okay. Excellent. That's what I think too.
That's the end of the chapter. It ends right there with Bree rolling around for about 5 minutes.
That's right.
Oh, and we learned that they had committed this awful faux pas that you're not really supposed to ride talking beasts.
Oh, yes.
We're like, oops.
Except when it's absolutely essential. And
when you're going to war and stuff.
Yeah, and they were going to battle, and they also needed to get there quickly.
That feels like an odd rule.
Yeah, it's a different time.
If you can ride them to war, when it's just like random whenever.
Yeah.
Or just not at all. I don't know. I don't get it.
I think it's different when the horse talks back.
I guess so. Which also the Narnia movies, remember those kids were riding talking horses all the time. That was a big no-no. Oh wait, they were riding to war. So it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of battle.
It's totally fine. Because I watched the movie just last week with my
students
because we finished the book, and there's Philip, the horse that Edmund rides in the movie, but right. They're riding to war, so actually it's okay. No, but then wait. At the end of the movie, when they're hunting the white stag, he's also on that horse, and I feel like it would be inappropriate for them to have declared war on just the white stag. That doesn't count as riding to war, so the movie did mess up.
Maybe they had a special arrangement.
This is actually like the like something I really could not care less about. if they change that.
I wasn't sure what was at the end of that sentence. I thought you were going to say you could really latch onto this and talk about it for a while.
I mean, I can. Do you want to?
No,
do we need more time for the episode?
What I would like to talk about is the very last paragraph here.
Okay, tell us about it.
And this is such an incredible ending for second to last chapter. They are, in a voice of profound gloom, lead on Prince Cor, Narnia in the north. So they're headed off, and he says, and Lewis says, but he looked more like a horse going to a funeral than a long-lost captive returning to home and freedom.
Sorry, it was me blowing out a match. I was lighting a candle while you were talking right here in front of us. I just realized I blew right into the microphone.
Little unknown tradition, we only read listener emails by candlelight.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I got to go turn off the lights because we're getting close to it. This is an interesting thing. This last little paragraph, I'm glad you mentioned it because I would have forgotten to talk about it. It took me by surprise to see that he's actually still not that excited. I think that's most of his fear. But you would think after this beautiful encounter with Aslan that he would be a little bit more eager to go into Narnia. But yet it still feels like it's this great unknown. He has no idea what to expect, and there's a lot of trepidation here.
Yes. I think that it's important to note that he is going, which is a big step, because he was just going to kind of stay
he was
where
chill
he
with the hermit.
And so he is going, but it's still hard for him, which is this wonderful picture of his journey and a reflection of our journey as Christians, where like we're moving forward, but there's still the old us that is being removed as we move forward.
That's true. Yeah.
So two quick notes. One is I love the way that Shasta says bezeling or something or other.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't remember the full word in bezeling.
That's like he was like building faulty bricks, right? That didn't have enough screen on the side. Is that right?
Yeah, bezel. Gosh.
I'm trying to be like you. It doesn't work out as well. That was hilarious that he doesn't know what embezzling is. I thought that was actually really funny.
Yes. And then my big question for you is, did the story that Prince Cor told about his life, did it remind you of anything in the Bible?
No, it didn't. Yeah, you mentioned this earlier. What are we talking? Okay. What are you thinking about? This
happened once I saw the Pauline Baines illustrations.
Okay.
But it seems like it has a lot of points pulled from the story of Moses.
Okay, I've heard of him. Tell me more.
So there's a prince, and he's removed from his house. Mm-hmm. There's some slavery involved.
Yeah.
Nothing's one-to-one, but it's there. Mm-hmm. And then the floating up to the shore and then being picked up by a different family. All are
I hadn't thought about that. I like that a lot.
Story. Yeah. And I don't know if there's something deep there or if it's just like a nice way to pull some of that. I'm sure it was at least partially intentional.
Sure.
But we also, from what we've learned from our C.S. Lewis International Symposium, Lewis had an incredible memory and remembered almost everything he read. And I'm sure that the number of things that he read entered into his characters in different ways. But that one in particular stood out.
No, and there probably is some kind of connection, especially because with Lewis's love for mythology, back in ancient Mesopotamia, one of the very first rulers there in the Fertile Crescent was a man named Sargon. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all. He ruled the Akkadian Empire. I want to say like in the 2500s BC, maybe like the 26th century BC, around there. Although I'm not 100% sure about the actual date itself. But a lot of what we know about Sargon as a leader is this, as with many ancient leaders, is a huge mix of both myth and history, and it's sometimes really hard to separate the two. But actually part of his story is that supposedly, according to ancient tradition and myth as well too, he also was this ruler who was placed in a basket that floated down the Tigris River and is found in that, and then he kind of grows up in the palace and rises ranks in the palace, obviously just like Moses does. And then actually, but instead of Moses' story, the story of Sargon goes that eventually he rises up and he has the king's kind of council betray him and assassinate the king, and Sargon becomes the leader. And Sargon was a actual real person who did live, but it's hard to actually know where, what part's true and what isn't. But it is one of those things, just like many stories in the early part of the Bible we see, and this is Lewis's whole idea of the true myth, right? It's one of those stories that there's very strong parallels to Scripture, where I'm sure that Lewis was making some of those connections, knowing that having a future king or leader appear in a basket on the shore to be kind of adopted by another family is a very kind of tried and true story from the ancient world that I bet he is totally. I didn't even think about that. I love this.
Yeah.
I have no idea if I was right on my dates for Sargon, to be honest.
A lot of those are guesses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well, this is a great way to end for us. But next chapter, we have Rabadash the Ridiculous. So I guess he's not done.
Oh, wow.
There, I thought maybe this was the end of him last time.
Yeah.
I guess
we kind of left him hanging.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see where we go. But before we get into, I can't believe it, our season finale, our last chapter, we do have an email to read today. It's an email from Bailey, and it is entitled "Warning: Spoilers Ahead."
Ooh.
But we've gotten to the part that we can read it now.
Okay. How did you know that?
We only have so after I read this chapter today, I was looking through. I was like, "What are we going to do for our email today?" And I was like, "Oh, like." What other? Maybe I was like, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to read this email. I don't know what other spoilers there would be, and it didn't spoil me. So I was like, oh, we're fine.
Okay.
So
I think the best thing we could do is next time you get another wisdom tooth removed is to read anything that has a spoiler in it.
Yeah.
And then you won't remember it.
I won't remember it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll probably have another one coming up soon. Did we even talk about this in the show? Because I got a fifth.
No, but it is amazing.
I had a fifth wisdom tooth removed
yes,
this past year.
If someone knows the people at Guinness, give us a call.
No. What's crazy?
He's not at 30 yet, but he has had more wisdom teeth than most people have removed.
I was asking it wasn't like my regular dentist. I guess it was like a surgeon,
a tooth doctor.
Yeah, sure. And I had to go get a fifth wisdom tooth taken out. And I got my other ones taken when I was like 16, 17. So like and I asked the guy, I'm like, this is weird, right? And he's like, no, not at all. He's like, I do like 5 of these a week. He's like 5, extra wisdom teeth, I guess. And he's like, dude, we've had people in here with 17, 18 of these things. And I was like, that's weird. Why don't we talk about this more?
Yeah.
But so I guess we're talking about it. There you go.
We're just trying
the more you know.
Yeah, get that information out there.
Yeah, we're trying
just
to
have a little fundraiser for you.
Yeah. So here is an email from Bailey. Bailey says, "Hey, Daniel and Phil. I wanted to say I'm absolutely loving the Horse and His Boy podcast. My sister also listens to your podcast, and we quote you guys all the time. I've been impressed with how you guys have handled the racial issues in the book with both delicacy and honesty. I honestly love this book, which I think is partly because I love horses, but mostly because the characters are all very well written. A parallel I recently noticed was that of Shasta being renamed Kor, and how in the Bible, receiving a new name was often symbolic of being chosen and of conversion. At the beginning, Shasta's story is incredibly sad. Almost immediately, we notice the lack of relationship between him and his, in quotations here, father. I'm referring to Arshish. and how that affects him. We get a picture of what his life has been like when the soldier hits him pretty violently. He's almost knocked down, and Shasta isn't even fazed. Shasta has no hope for the future, and all throughout the story, he faces an identity crisis, fear, and he has to deal with how little he knows about the outside world. But along the way, Shasta begins to develop bravery, strength, and perseverance. In the stunning climax, we see Shasta receive a totally new identity. He meets his real father, who is everything a dad should be, discovers he's actually a prince, and gets a new name. It's a beautiful example of how God changes us from the inside out. I'm also fascinated by Aravis's story. You guys noted how different her and Lazareline's personalities are, but what I noticed was how before Aravis traveled with Shasta and the horses, she was a lot like Lazareline. The slave system is pretty systemic in Calormen, and Aravis is callous to it at first. We see this when she first meets Shasta and looks down on him because of his birth, and also how she has so little empathy for her stepmother's slave, which is what, Phil, you and I were talking about earlier today.
Right.
Yet, it's with Lazareline that she first takes a step towards empathy, when she realizes that traveling with Shasta was much nicer. I think that Aravis probably didn't recognize how damaging her culture was until she saw the oppression firsthand while traveling with Shasta. We can see her come full circle when she meets Shasta as Prince Cor, and she stresses that she's being nice because she has changed, not because he's a prince. On top of this awesome growth, Aravis is just an all-around awesome, brave, noble person, and I'm so happy C.S. Lewis put her in the story. Thanks for reading this atrociously long email, and this is now me talking, not Bailey, which we don't mind at all. We love emails. I'm sure our listeners enjoy this too, but so don't ever apologize. Bailey then also writes further up and further in. And then there's a final little PS here that says, Daniel, I also pronounce pajamas. And while I have met people who say pajamas, they're few and far between.
Interesting. Bailey, we're very curious which part of the world you live in where they say pajamas.
What do you say? Did we talk about this?
I say pajamas, but I also say aunt.
What else? Oh,
instead of aunt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Aunt feels very fancy. If I was up north, I guess I would say aunt.
Is that like a northern thing, I guess?
I don't know.
I
feel like the aunt, saying it that way makes me feel like I'm in the south.
Southern,
so
yeah. I definitely say aunt. I don't say aunt.
Yeah.
Aunt. That's odd to me.
Yeah.
I just never really thought about that much. Yeah, aunt. Pajamas. We're going to insult like half of our listeners.
You sound a little bit like Arnold there. Pajamas.
Well, this is not probably what Bailey wanted us to talk about. Let's go back. Let's talk first about Shasta here. This idea that just like, obviously a big example would be Jacob in the Bible, also Abraham, right, of people who receive new. Also, you have even Simon Peter in the New Testament. You have people who are kind of given new names, new identities, and I love this idea that this is Shasta not just receiving a new name, but really fully embracing his new identity, his true identity of his long lost identity as Prince Cor. Yeah. And I was so silly. I can't believe I hadn't thought about this. How beautiful it is that he has such a great relationship with this new dad.
Right.
I didn't even think about. I've totally forgotten about Arshish and how bad it used to be.
Right. Yeah. And what a stark difference from the beginning to where we are now.
Yeah.
And considering what he could have had the whole time, but the fact that he had to lose that and then get back there.
Yeah.
And he literally had a hero's journey to get there.
Uh-huh.
He was born in comfort and royalty and then taken away from that and had to go through trials to get back to his family and his father.
Yeah, that's well said. And then Aravis here, to Bailey's point, I think it's really... Lazareline still is far and away my favorite character of the whole book. I loved Lazareline. Mm-hmm. I wish we got more of her. I do think that Lazareline and Aravis's time together is really what, just like Bailey said, what really helps Aravis understand empathy in this story. And I think a big part, I love the way that Lewis has structured this story, that kind of happened. We got 2 full chapters, or maybe was it 3 full chapters? It was like 2.5 of really just of Aravis away from Shasta, kind of going through this development on her own. I think that was a really cool. That's probably maybe one of my favorite parts of the book was just her in Tashbaan alone, or without the main characters here. But then again, exactly what we were talking about earlier. Bailey mentions this not having this empathy for a stepmother's slave and just kind of being really callous towards the injustice that she sees. And it's not really until she kind of meets it firsthand that she actually is able to recognize it and build that empathy and realize that Shasta's kind of helped her open her eyes to these issues.
Right. And what a wonderful thing for her she had to be removed in order to experience that, to then have that empathy. Yeah. And a lot of people they never get that chance. If you're isolated from that, I heard this great thing saying that this is more talking about like the super rich, like the very top 0.1%. But if you're flying everywhere on a private jet, you forget what it's like to wait in line. Yeah. And that's kind of grounding in a no pun intended way, but you remember what it's like to be like everybody else. And when you have that removed, it really alters your mind. Yeah.
Oh, that's really well said. It's nice to end talking about airplanes here, as many people might even be flying back home after the holidays listening to this. That's kind of fun.
Bailey, thank you for the email.
Bailey, this was a great email. Well, really, really well said. I'm glad that I finally was able to read this. It's been sitting there in the inbox in all caps spoilers, and I was like, I want to open it and read it so badly. But I didn't. Well, Phil, I think you did last episode, so why don't I go ahead and end this episode for us?
Works for me.
So this episode is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. This month, we had our annual Christmas special on the Dancing Lawn where we ate Turkish Delight. Also, I released a little episode talking about The Most Reluctant Convert, which was the C.S. Lewis movie that came out by Max McLean, who was directed by Norman Stone. Have we talked about this at all on the show, on the regular show?
I'm not sure.
I don't think it came, because you're not really super aware of this. We've talked about a little bit about it, but
no, I'm not.
Yeah, so I will just put this out there, and I'll put a link in the episode's description because it could be a great thing for people to watch over the holidays. The Fellowship for the Performing Arts, which is a Christian organization, a Christian company. They made their first feature-length film that's run by a man named Max McLean, who I've had the pleasure of seeing perform a couple of different times up in D.C., and they made a movie based off of a play that he wrote and starred in called The Most Reluctant Convert. They filmed it over the last year or so, and it is about Lewis's conversion to Christianity. And it's really well made. I did a little thing. I don't even know if I told you that I did this, because it was when you were on Thanksgiving. I was driving to work one day, and I just recorded a little 30-minute cool. My thoughts on the movie, and I just posted it there for people on Patreon because I really liked it. I thought it's one of my favorite endings of any film this year. Okay. The ending itself is absolutely beautiful and really seeks to understand Lewis as a myth in his own right. And I thought that was a really powerful conclusion that they kind of take away with here. But I won't spoil it too much. But it's been in theaters for the last month or so, but it just came out. It's available to stream over just through their website for Fellowship of the Performing Arts. So I'll put a link there. I think it's through the middle of January it's available. Highly recommend seeing it if you have if you've know a lot about Lewis's story. You'll still find many things to enjoy. If you don't know a lot about C.S. Lewis, it's actually a great entry point as well. It's very much a one-man show developed into a movie, so there actually is a lot of fourth wall breaks and a lot of monologues. But I think it really works well, and it was a really interesting approach to take. So I give a lot more thoughts on it over on Patreon. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. That
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, you were already on Thanksgiving break when I went to go see it. That's why you and I didn't go see it together. Yeah. I think I texted you about it, but we didn't actually talk about my thoughts on it. So yeah, there you go.
It's one of my favorite extra podcast type things. Yeah. Back when a little bit of history, we both got into podcast around the same time, 2006, 2007, for slightly different reasons. I did it because I didn't have any money to pay for anything, and I could only buy a few songs, but podcasts were free. And one of the podcasts I listened to every now and then, he would just go for a walk and record stuff. And sometimes he would buy something at a store in the middle of a, quote episode.
Yeah.
But it's a less succinct form of content sometimes, but sometimes you get more raw content that way, where someone's just thinking out loud, and especially for someone who's a verbal processor, that can actually be really good to hear like how you arrive at a thought.
Yeah, it's something I've enjoyed. I was like, maybe I'll do it. I called it Driving with Daniel, and I was like, maybe I'll do a couple more. Maybe I'll I was like, here's my thoughts on Spider-Man. Boom, just throw them up there. If anybody cares, it's really just something. I was like, I'm gonna think about this stuff in the car. I'll just talk to my son in the back of the car and be like, here's what I'm thinking right now, buddy, because he can't respond. It's like, maybe I'll just record it from now on, So, but yeah, that's over on Patreon, and we all, as always, we want to give a special shout out to Elias Dean, Hannah Anderson, John Marr, Emily Wakefield, and Ryan Smith, who support us at our top tiers. As always, we would love listener feedback. You can email us at thenarniapodcast@gmail.com. That's thenarniapodcast@gmail.com. Or you can leave us a voicemail at 406-646-6733. As always, we appreciate a review wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we'll be back next time with our season finale of Chapter 15.
See you soon.